Hello and welcome to the WIHS Journal, Public Affairs from 104.9. I'm Paul Kretschmer, introducing Steve Tuzanu and his special guest for today's broadcast, Steve Brown from Key Life.
I'm Steve Tuzanu with the founder of Key Life Ministries, Steve Brown. Steve, thank you so much for spending time with us.
Oh, Steve, I appreciate the time. I love you guys and what you're doing. And I'm a long ways off, but I can get you on the internet.
That's for sure. My first question for you, Dr. Brown, is when did you receive Christ and how did that happen?
Well, when I was a teenager, my mother took me to Monterey, where Billy Graham was then living and was speaking. And I became a Christian 2,000 years ago, but it became real to me at Monterey. And after that, I went through a period when I was in college of agnosticism. I had a major in philosophy. And then I went to a graduate school at Boston University. And it was theology. And I was very liberal this side of wacko. And then my little girl, who was 1 day old, got very ill, and it was a dangerous situation. And some Christians prayed for her, Steve, and in an incredible way, she was healed. And all of a sudden, all of the things that I thought were silly became real. And that was the beginning of a trek back to what I am today, the spiritual giant you're talking to. But actually, it was a trek back to a strong evangelical fundamental Christian belief, which is where I've stood almost all of my ministry.
Dr. Brown, you were in broadcasting at one time. What happened in your life that you went from broadcasting to being a pastor?
Steve, I've known that I was going to be a pastor since I was 3 or 4 years old. And the reason God did it that way is because he knew I wouldn't like it. And so he planted it in my heart. In fact, the reason I went to Boston University wasn't because I believed anything. I just couldn't shake this thing about how I define myself. And so I did commercial broadcasting for a long time, but I could never shake that original call when I was a small child. And Steve, there was no reason for that. My father was an alcoholic. My mother was a Christian, but, she read Spurgeon in the morning and taught me how to cuss in the evening. So she was a very earthy Christian, and there was nothing. It just was. It was a call I could never shake. And so finally I just said, all right, I'll do it, but I will only do it for you, Jesus. And so for the next 30 years, I served as a pastor.
You're the founder of Key Life Ministry. What happened in your life to bring that about?
Well, it wasn't so much what happened in my life. I had a friend who owned some radio stations, and he said, I thought when I entered the pastorate that God would be able to use my experience and gifts and broadcasting, and he thought different. So for years, I didn't do anything broadcasting, and this friend said, Steve, why aren't you on the radio? And I said, I don't know. God's never opened the door. He said, I'm going to put you on the radio. And he said, I'm going to take your sermons, cut them up, and put an announcer with it. And you'll get 2 or 3 responses the first month, and that'll grow. Well, Steve, we got 3,000 responses the first month, and it felt like we were trying to catch a train. And so I had decided that God wasn't going to do the radio thing. And as you know, because you've been in it a lot of years, you never get it out of your blood. But I'd finally put it on the altar and just said, Lord, obviously that's not where you want me. You gave me this good voice, and it's certainly not television. I'm ugly, but I've got this good voice, and you're not going to use it. And I was kind of kicking and screaming into Christian broadcasting, which, by the way, I love.
So you were in Key Life doing that ministry, and you were at one point the president.
Yes, I was. Once that thing things started getting legs, we formed an organization, and I was still a pastor. And we got a board that would oversee it, and that led to a name. I was then the pastor at Key Biscayne Presbyterian Church, and that's where the name Key Life comes from. And I've served as the president forever. But I have a friend who's been my friend during all of these years, and he headed up a large company. I said, would you come and run Key Life? Because I don't know what I'm doing. And so he prayed about it for about a week and called up and said, I'm coming. And his name is George Bingham. And you guys who are listening will meet George, because he's going to come with me for the banquet. So you'll love him as much as I do too.
What do you like most about what you do at Key Life?
I like teaching Scripture. I really do. That's where my real calling is. And, once you do what God gifted you and called you to do, there's a sense of peace and enjoyment about it. So I write books, and I ran away from kindergarten, Steve. So they used to get good crowd of teachers who couldn't believe what happened to me, because I was not a good kid. But I've been called as a Bible teacher, and I do a lot of other things. But when I do that, it's kind of like that old movie where the guy said, when I run, I feel God's pleasure. Well, when I preach, I feel God's pleasure, because I'm doing what he called me to do.
We have listeners who are aware of the banquet and that you're coming. What would you tell our listeners to encourage them to attend that?
Well, it won't be encouragement, but bring a checkbook, because we're going to ask for money, because God's work should be supported by God's people. And we, of course, understand if you can't, but that may not be an encouragement. But let me tell you something. Jesus said we're a group of Christians come together, that he's in their midst. And so Jesus is going to be there, and he's going to party with us. And we're going to have one great time. And I hope if you haven't gotten a ticket that you'll show up, because you're going to miss something you wish you had been to.
We have a lot of pastors listening to this station. What could you tell a pastor to encourage him?
Steve, we have over 4,000 pastors on our mailing list. And if you write to me, I might not see it, because we get a lot of letters and emails and phone calls. But if you're a pastor, you go right to me. And I spend a considerable portion of my time talking with and praying with and laughing with and crying with pastors. My favorite people in the world are pastors. And I've never known a time when it was harder to be a pastor. And I would encourage you to stay with it and don't shilly-shally. And God will walk with you where you walk. There is no greater calling in this world than to pastor God's people, to be a sub-shepherd. He gives you a front row seat on what he's doing in the world. And it's hard. I know it's hard. I did it for 30 years, and I think I can get to heaven without grace. I think the angels won't even ask about Jesus. They'll say, you poor dear, you come in. So if you're a pastor, I love and I hope you can show, and this will be refreshing to you, just as WIHS is refreshing to you.
Dr. Brown, thank you so much for your time. We're looking forward to seeing you at the Celebrate Jesus Gala this month, October the 28th. That'll be at 4:30 when the doors open. Thank you so much for your time.
Steve, thank you for your time, and God bless you. I'll see you in a while.
Our special guest on today's WIHS Journal broadcast was Steve Brown, Key Life speaker at 11:30 in the morning and at 10:16 in the evening, Monday through Friday. He was interviewed by Steve Tuzanu. For further information on what you heard on today's broadcast, call us at 860-346-1049. 860-346-1049. As a side note, we're very happy that Steve Brown is going to be able to be with us this year. He was originally scheduled a year ago, but due to hurricanes in Florida at that time, he was unable to make it that weekend. Once again, for further information, call us at 860-346-1049. 860-346-1049. Or send email to office@wihsradio.org. office@wihsradio.org. I'm Paul Kretschmer for Steve Tuzenu and Steve Brown. The WIHS Journal is public affairs from 104.9 WIHS.